Excellent. Hello, everybody coming in. Welcome. All right, brilliant. Hello, audience. Excellent. All right, so we're live on YouTube. Fantastic. So, all right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Victoria, Aoife, ready to go? Brilliant. So thank you all so much for being here with us this Saturday afternoon. Welcome to the Stay at Home Festival, and also welcome back to those who've been enjoying some of our other events as well. And welcome to Home in Our Bodies. We're really excited about this event this afternoon. So I'm going to briefly introduce you to our two poets that we have here with us, and then I'm just going to hand it over and let them take it away. So first I'll introduce you to Aoife. Aoife Lyall was born in Dublin and now lives in the Scottish Highlands. Her first collection, Mother Nature, is published by Bloodaxe Books in 2021. She's worked as a guest curator for the Scottish Poetry Library and as a guest editor for Butcher's Dog. Our other wonderful poet that we have with us is Victoria Kennefick. Victoria's first collection, Eat or We Both Starve, is published by Carcanet Press, and a selection of her poems appear in the Carcanet New Poetries VIII Anthology. Her pamphlet, White Whale, won the Munster Literature Centre Fool for Poetry Chapbook competition and the Saboteur Award for Best Poetry Pamphlet. So a very warm welcome to Victoria and Aoife.
Fantastic, and thank you all for coming to join us this afternoon as well. And we are just going to go straight into it because we know there's loads of fantastic events that you're going to be a part of today. And we just want to say thank you to the Stay at Home Festival for letting us be part of this fantastic initiative again this year. So what we're going to do, I'm going to read a little bit from Mother Nature, and Victoria is going to read a little bit from Eat or We Both Starve. And then we're going to have a short workshop about the themes that we're going to look at and discuss today.
And just briefly to talk about those themes, I suppose, hello, I'm Victoria. You're so welcome and we're so thrilled to have you here. And again, to echo Aoife's sentiment that it's wonderful to be part of the Stay at Home Festival, which is so important, even more so, I think, in this second year of lockdown or second part of lockdown. So in these pandemic times, we have, been cut off from our things that I suppose make us feel better about ourselves and distract us from what it means to be a person in a body, going off on our holidays, going on city breaks, even visiting our friends and family without even thinking about it. All of these things have been denied to us, and we've been confined to barracks, if you like, to the confines of our home, but equally and more so to the confines of our bodies. And what Aoife and myself are really interested in exploring in our work anyway, and also in this is very short generative element after our readings, is what effect that has had on our bodies. How do we relate to them now? Do we feel differently about them? How do we feel about the possibility of emerging, blinking into the light of our lockdown easing? Is it anxiety? Is it excitement? Were we, pleased to have, the social scrutiny that we might feel about our bodies relieved from that during the lockdown? Or did we feel maybe like we were wilting without attention or without a way to escape our bodies or show them off, or everything in between? So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at during this short little event.
Yep. So we're going to look at these themes. We're going to look at how they come up in our work, and then we'll have some discussion as well. So if you do find yourself with a question or two, do put it into the chat, and we'll get a chance to answer one or two of them. And then myself and Victoria might have a wee chat as well, because it's something that, particularly with bodies, that when you find somebody else who's thinking about it in not in the same way, but along those same wavelengths, it's a fantastically liberating thing to know it's something that you can talk about and that other people are thinking about too. As Victoria said, not being near other people's bodies forces us to be more aware of our own, and we'll talk about that too. And we're really looking forward to hearing what you're going to come up with. And obviously it's quite a short workshop for the day that's in it, but you can use the hashtag StayAtHomeFest, and particularly for this workshop, hashtag HomeBodies, and then me and Victoria will be able to see what you come up with after the workshop as well.
Okay, so Aoife is going to read first from her sublime, moving, beautiful collection, Mother Nature, and you're really in for a treat.
Thanks, Victoria. So this collection is very much, it's about pregnancy, it's about pregnancy loss and early motherhood. So the body and bodies are absolutely at the center of this collection. And so the poems, the 4 poems that I've picked, or the 5 rather, for today, are very much focusing in on those poems at which the body really is the heart of the experience. And sometimes that can be an overwhelmingly positive experience, and sometimes it can be absolutely devastating, like in the case of pregnancy loss, which will be the first poem that I read. The Gravediggers. Worn smooth, their shovels, picks, and sombre mattocks congregate by the tarpaulin shroud. It is slow work. They must be thorough. There must be width and breadth and scope for more. Normally a chatty bunch, they give the smallest graves their silence. Their job to turn this hallowed, hollowed ground of mine from grave to garden with the little dignity such deconsecration can afford. A labor of love, they pause to pay their last respects. Leave me with my immeasurable silence, expecting nothing in return. So when you're pregnant and quite heavily pregnant as well, it very much changes your relationship with your body in a deeply profound way. You have 2 hearts, you have 2 heartbeats, you have 4 hands, 4 legs, all of these different things to think about, and it brings a lot of thought and a lot of stillness into your body as well, but also practically a lot of movement. Octopus. They crochet them for premature babies. It stops the lonely reach and tug of the thin plastic lifelines on the neonatal wards. They find instead the thick, pulsing twist of an umbilical octopus and wrap their fists around its tentacles, calmed by the curling thoughts of their absent mothers. So I tell the man behind the till, it's for you, this plush octopus, all tentacles and soft stitching. Home, price pulled off and care label cut. I rest him on the marbled coral of my stomach. I watch him float on the tide of rising limbs that twist and curl beneath him. My octopus, my omphalos buoyed by the living current. And on that same theme as well, the next poem, all the different ways that a baby moves around inside you. Vaudeville. Strong man. You muscle into the space around you, lie on your back to juggle and pummel the ceiling of your convex stage with newfound feet and new-formed fists. Acrobat. In love with how your body moves, enthralled by its joyful backflips and flip-flops, your long limbs whirl and unfurl in the heady melee. Comedian. You flail about in outrageous ways. Impossible protrusions and sudden dips propel you straight-faced and inscrutable across your spotlit stage. Dancer. You slow things down with a gentle routine of elbows and knees and hands and feet wrapped round the vaulted ribs of your private theatre. Magician. You astound and amaze with a flurry of quick tricks and slapstick, and leave your audience completely unaware of how you can and do disappear in there. There are 2 poems in the book to do with labour and childbirth, and one was written before I had experienced it, and the one that I will read just now is the one I wrote after I had experienced it, and in fact during. My poor husband was having to write lines into his phone in between all the other instructions that were being very calmly and directed towards him. Labour. Pitched headfirst into a sea of blood and broken waters. All I know is a sodden bed and a plastic tube between my teeth. Contractions crash through me. I beg, I bargain, I promise. Screams splinter in my mouth. Sweat slicks the sheets, they can't change fast enough. My hamstring cramps, my pelvis pulls itself apart. Oblique muscles tear like cotton with every encouraging cry of push, push, push. My skin rips with every just one more. And there you are, skin and muscle, cry and mouth. When they cut the cord, my heart breaks, and I cry like a mother, desperate for her baby. And the final poem that I'll read today is much further along, about 6 months, and written after the Seamus Heaney poem, which I'm very, very fond of growing up. While the others are away. Him at work, her at school. I sit with you on the sitting room floor and peel potatoes. Surrounded by cushions, you watch the knife slice through each Maris Piper. Your hands reaching, grasping, dropping one by one, the potatoes halved and heaped between us like playthings. Delighting in the spectacle of the stop and splash, the satisfied thump and thud of the filling pot. Job done, you touch your fingers to my lips. I kiss your hands, and they taste of starch and home. So thank you very much. And without any further ado at all, I'd like to welcome Victoria back to read from her collection, Eat or We Both Starve.
Wow, Aoife, thank you so much. That was absolutely beautiful. I'm not right after it. Such gorgeous poetry and such a beautiful exploration of the before and after of motherhood, and what an amazing earth-shaking event it is in any person's life. I'm going to read, as Aoife said, a few poems from Eat or We Both Starve. And I was thinking of a quote from Flannery O'Connor. I did my PhD on Flannery O'Connor a while ago now, and I remember this quote that I didn't realize how much I had internalized it until I was actually preparing for this event and thinking about bodies in my book. And he says, "To the hard of hearing you shout, and for the almost blind you draw large and startling figures." And I think in my exploration of the body for myself, I had to go big and I had to go large, and I had to draw very big red figures for myself in order to grapple with the various difficulties and joys and complications we all experience being in our bodies, whatever body we were gifted when we were born. So this first poem, it's the first in the collection, and it's it's been given a warning before. It's quite gruesome in a way. But it is, I suppose, an attempt to turn the tables on that traditional archetype of the devouring mother that Jung was very fond of, and instead look at what would happen if we used our mothers, and I mean that in both an individual sense, but also in our collective mothers, as fuel rather than something to be afraid of, in a sense. But also there is obviously that anxiety too about being consumed. Learning to eat my mother where my mother is the teacher. Where did I start? Yes, with the heart, enlarged, its chambers stretched through caring. In this body, feeling is what the body is. The alert heart, an alarm rings out in all hours of the night, flashing red and white. Oh, is it in defiance or defeat? I don't know. I eat it anyway, raw, still warm, the size of my fist. I love it. Strange, a vegetarian resorting to cannibalism. She is disgusted with me. Wouldn't you begin with the outside? Sweating, I pry open the rib cage. I do not want to eat her ribs, but I do. Then strip her fingers of meat. I hold them tenderly in my mouth. Watch her blue eyes well up out of love, I assume. I move from heart to ribs, fingers to spongy lungs, buoyant, porous, melt in the mouth. The eyes are tougher than expected. Aqueous humor slithers down my throat. A surprise. It's minty. I know what you're thinking. I left the brain. No, not so. I have consumed that organ piecemeal, sweet morsels since my teeth came in. It tastes like the sounds of sirens you don't know are screaming until they suddenly stop. Our bodies have a very effective mechanism when something is hard to swallow. And indeed, this pandemic and all that comes with it has been very difficult to swallow in terms of, acceptance and living with it. So this poem is called Choke. I want to hold things in my mouth, a key, buttons, a fingernail, the click of a boiled sweet against enamel. A toddler, I stole my mother's pills, prized the lid off the bottle with tiny teeth, arranged the capsules by colour and size. My mother panicked when she found me, tablets skittled on the bedspread. At the hospital, the nun held the cup of charcoal to my mouth. I spat black into a white bowl. Its burnt taste. I thought I must be bad. A child, given a boiled sweet by a cousin, I popped it in my mouth, turned a dainty shade of blue. My father spun me upside down, the sweet shaken loose. In another version, my mother pushes the sweet down my throat with a finger, or maybe that was when I was 3 and nearly choked in a different cousin's house, gagging on another boiled sweet. Maybe that's what I'm looking for. My mother's finger down my throat, pushing sugar deep into me. I tend to outsource my well-being to a wide variety of alternative medicine practitioners. I am a firm believer in Western medicine too, and I'm very grateful for all it has given us, and particularly, my gosh, the vaccines that we'll hopefully get in Ireland in my age group before too long. But I've always been fascinated by the way that alternative medicine practitioners, whether they be acupuncturists or craniosacral therapists or homeopaths, and I've tried the full gauntlet, how they make my body feel so much better. It's an astounding thing to walk out of somebody's room after an hour and feel like all of the stress has just been either massaged out or poked out with needles or whatever it is that particular practitioner practices. So I find them so integral to my well-being that I really missed them over the particularly harsh first lockdown. But I've had very many strange experiences too, and this is one of them. Alternative medicine. I am here to heal, to confess to that darkness standing in front of my eyes when I open them, that food squirms as if alive with maggots, that I have shut my mouth to everything but words. The therapist taps my shoulders, my head, my knees, tells me I was a nun once, very strict. This makes sense. I know how cleanly I like to punish myself. Also, a Celtic priestess. I hope that I had red hair, that I ate men like air, all that jazz. She moves to my forehead. Her fingers drum on my skin. There were two of you, she says. My body remembers in a jolt the guilt, black and endless. It is a tunnel. No, it is someone else's shadow, almost like mine. A twin, poor thing. In my mother's womb, I consumed this sibling, she says, like I gnaw at my flesh now, my body feeding on whatever scrap. You didn't do it, she says. I know I did. I know I did. My little twin, one of us had to go. I love going out dancing. It's like one of the most life-affirming activities. I tend to go absolutely bananas on the dance floor. And again, that's something that my body misses, that interaction with space. Somewhere new, we have kitchen discos at home, and we had to get a disco ball and everything, but it's not the same. It's not the same. The bumping into new people, the taking up space in a different location. But it's been a long time since I've properly gone on the tear because I tend to become very effusive. Big girl. In the nightclub, I drank peach schnapps with ice. My heart, a nest of eggs. I wanted all of you to see my tender belly and not be ashamed. I showed only peacock eyes, my big fuchsia mouth. I wanted to fill up with the compliance of beautiful wet tongues flashing in and out under lights. Outside, after kissing some of you or trying to ample for all of you, I sucked chips, salty and bitter, gathered those who remained starving, too drunk to walk home, into a circle. Around I went, parting lips, pushing masticated potato onto the dent of your plump tongues. My saliva in your stomachs, stirring, my pulse in your necks, hatching. Yeah, so I don't drink anymore at all. With, it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. This is my second last poem, and it's part of a sequence, or what I like to call a broken sequence in the collection, which is mostly concerned with, it's called Hunger Strikes, and it's mostly concerned with saints and martyrs of the Middle Ages and beyond who engaged in very extreme behavior, usually around eating and self-harm, for multiple reasons. And I suppose in the poems, I'm trying to explore the reasons why they may have done this, and also can we see any connection between what they did as young women before the internet and before selfies and before film and before photographs. Was there still this illness or this desire for perfection or cleanliness or containment? And what did it represent? Was it a rebellion? Which I think in many cases, it certainly was the only way that these women could assert their agency and avoid the option, well, it wasn't really an option, avoid getting married and having endless babies until probably they died from having them. So this one is about, it's the first one, Hunger Strikes Catherine of Siena. So Catherine of Siena, some of you may know, was one of these extreme women, and she had a few older sisters, and she wanted to join the convent at a very young age. But her sister Bonaventura, who had been married to an older man, passed away, and they wanted her to marry her sister's widower. And her sister had told her how she controlled her husband and his behavior. When he wasn't kind to her, she would starve herself. And so Catherine used that exact same trick to avoid marrying this man, and ultimately married, had a mystical marriage at 21 with Christ, which is what this poem explores. Hunger strikes Catherine of Siena, 1347 to 1380. My sister taught me how, oh, Bonaventura, they wanted me to marry him, the slack-jawed widower. I vomited twigs, hid in the convent, wore a widow's habit. The other nuns complained until at 21 I met him. He presented me with a ring fashioned from his skin, told me this sliver of flesh bound us. Wait, he told me, promising it would be special. I levitated, only ate his body. Others did not understand how good it was to kiss his holy prepuce. Oh, Bonaventura, I am a house of sticks. My bones rattle with desire until I lick it, feel it quiver alive on my tongue. And so this last poem is one that I suppose highlights the disconnect that we can have between our perceived idea of what our bodies might look like and what they really are like and what they really can do, and also that impact, how that might impact those around us too, who might love the body we're in as we actively despise it or grapple with our distaste for it. Beached whale. At first, I thought that enormous lump of red-brown on the sand was the trunk of some ancient washed-up tree. It was only when I mounted the object, digging my small hands into something far too pliable, that it really hit me. The stale smell of 1,000 low tides, and the mute, open mouths of the many onlookers with their hysterical dogs, the seagulls circling like squalling clouds, my mother's curlew scream as she ran towards me, disjointed. Astride the whale like this, looking at my mother move through dimensions, planes of distance, I thought of boutique dressing rooms brimming with clothes and tension like gas expanding, and of two little girls watching their mother cry at her reflection distorted in a fluorescent mirror. The weight of her past made flesh on her hips, the scars of our arrivals barely healed after all this time. My blind hands all over the body, grasping, desperate to hold on to something real, not knowing what that was. Thank you so much for tuning in and for listening.
Fantastic. The thing that I love about Victoria's work is it just goes there and it kind of leaves you going, we can talk like that, we can think like that, other people have thought this as well. And it's such to use Victoria's word, it's such an effusive way of looking at a body and to have that agency over it, over the words with which we describe our body, because the words that we use about our body really do define how we think about them. How we talk about ourselves is usually the biggest way that we can big ourselves up, or more often run ourselves down. But we have a couple of questions and then we will have a bit of a chat. So we've got one here for Victoria, and it's, could Victoria tell us more about what she means by a broken sequence in the Starving Saints poems?
Oh yeah, of course. So I initially wrote the poems as a sequence. I was experimenting with sequences at the time, and it was called Hunger Strikes, and each of the different sections was a different saint. And when it was all together, on over a couple of pages, I found it really difficult to read myself, having written it. It was very, very intense and cloying, and I almost felt like it was difficult to escape from, in a sense. And when I was putting the collection together, I was working actually with Colette Bryce and with John McAuliffe, and I had another series of poems that were scattered. The second family sequence, as it is now a complete sequence. So I just, talking to them, and Colette was really the first person that suggested it. She was like, well, why don't you just break it apart and have it, I suppose, come in at various different points thematically in the collection. So they all are called Hunger Strikes, but it gives you a bit of time and a bit of space as you go through reading them to look at, different ways of exploring perhaps some of the themes that they're looking at. So I think it really opened up the collection hugely, actually, and allowed different poems to speak to each other that wouldn't have necessarily had the space to do that if I had put all the poems together. And it just, I think even the idea of that broken sequence of it, you can read them, in order if you want through the book. But I think it just gives a lot more space, and I felt there was more air in the book once I broke them apart and kept them away from each other. I think that was important. Thank you.
That's a great.
Yeah.
And I absolutely agree with what you say in the sense of keeping them apart. But what I think it also does is it prevents you from reading them and then going, oh, well, that bit's done.
Yes.
And moving on, because so often in life you can hear about these women in so many different ways, but it can be in quite a cloistered way, and then it's almost seen as being apart from everything else, as if they were then and you are now, when in fact that's not how we exist. Our bodies exist through our, very literally through our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, and all of the women they knew as well. And sometimes it can be overwhelming to go, I am the culmination of all of this experience that I hear about and learn. And I think that breaking up of that sequence brings that across in such a genuine way of going, there is another person who's also experienced this, and there will be another, and there will be another, and into the present day as well. And that's the question that I wanted to ask Victoria, actually, was about how, for you, when you were writing this collection, how did you learn, or do you learn, or are you still figuring it out, existing in a body that we are constantly meant to protect from unwanted attention, a body that we are socially expected to give freely to any number of children that we or other people think that we should have, but also to explore it, and not even for our own pleasure, but actually just for our own understanding, that there's so much of the body that just gets relegated to, that's nobody needs to know that except the doctor kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And did you find yourself coming up against that? Did you find yourself fighting or embracing?
I think all of those things. And I think, having had a very difficult relationship with my body growing up, and I think that massively impacting the poems that I wrote, because I was so scared of acknowledging how difficult I found being in my particular body, whatever disappointments I had about what it could or couldn't do, or how it looked or it didn't look, or how it worked or it didn't work. It massively impacted on my confidence, not only as a person, but massively as a poet, because I was afraid to, as you say, to say it out, like what was going on, whether it was like, am I too big? Am I too big as a person? Is my body too big? And not necessarily in size, but like almost like the aura of people as well. This sense of your you-ness, and trying to come to terms with it. And I suppose there are so many different ways that you can heal in that way. I recommend, obviously alternative therapy is really important. But I think it's much easier when somebody else loves you genuinely and accepts you. That might not necessarily be from your family. I think that's something that we can't always control, but that just acceptance of you. And that's what I remember an English teacher many years ago now saying to us, that love is total acceptance. And I never internalized that about our own bodies and how we have to accept them as they are. And I think, to add to what you're asking, to accept the fact that your body might be flawed, or it might be ill, or it might not make the babies that you want, or it might not, succeed in whatever it is to, being a woman, or whatever that definition is of, having a uterus or not, or whatever it is. So I think the word that, when you ask me that question, that comes to mind is acceptance. And that is a hard place to reach and a hard place to stay in, because our bodies are always throwing little surprise parties for us with different new, things going wrong. And particularly if you're a woman of childbearing age and you're in a relationship and, there are the possibility of babies, like, you're living in the place between life and death all the time, all the time. And no one knows, and we don't talk about it. You do, which is what is so special and brilliant about your book. But I think it's acceptance ultimately. And accepting when you're writing that's what you have to go with. It's tough though. Thank God for writing. There's another question here from Simon that I'm going to direct at you, if you don't mind, Aoife. So he says, when I listen to both your work, it's such a deep and authentic excavation of the body. It reminds me of a poet named Sylvia Legris, who one line that struck me from her work is the body as a complicated riddle of meat. I've heard that before. It's so brilliant. When writing your work, how did you both go about interrogating the body, lived experience, medical texts? So I'm gonna put that over to you, my love.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, very much in my case, it was absolutely lived experience for this first book. It was one of the things that I was very, very scared of, but didn't even really admit to myself until recently, was the idea of a cot debt. And my very firm belief, I had a brother older than myself and my sister, and I had experienced a cot debt just at 10 weeks old. And I had very much internalized this, that as long as the baby was sleeping on me, it would be fine. It couldn't happen. So I would sit for 5 hours at a time, sometimes two or three times over the 24 hours with the baby asleep on my lap. And it is amazing the things that you will endure to keep that baby asleep. So more than once I would have my food and my drink and my phone and the remote and my book and all these things they tell you to have, but then I would sit on the wrong side of the couch. And I would then have 5 hours to sit in my body and feel it, get hungry, feel myself need to go to the bathroom, feel muscles seize up and cramp and resolve themselves, all while I stayed in that space, just watching this baby who's now going to be 5 in a couple of weeks. So in that case, it was very much about that lived experience. For my next book that I'm working on, very much looking at more things like medical reports, different kinds of books, because once I got out of that stage where they were that little bit older, I started very much looking about how I exist in my body, but also the systems in which I have become a mother. So you're looking at the social attitudes and beliefs and expectations. You're looking at, religious ones, because whether you're religious or not, they can come into it. If you grew up in Ireland in the 90s, possibly now as well, the laundries, you leave the country and, the fear of God was that phrase that we all used all the time. And then you're suddenly going, other people didn't grow up with fear of the laundries. Okay, so how is that shaped? How do I feel about different types of mothers? What kind of biases and prejudices have I internalized? And then you have to go, okay, that's not the way of it, because it's a country that sets up the mother as the absolute epitome, Mother Ireland. But my goodness, if you were the wrong type of mother, you were crucified. If you'd put a foot wrong, you were done for. So it's a fantastic question, something you could talk about for days and days and days. But what we do is give yourselves a chance to do a bit of writing as well. So I'll just move straight into that, if that's okay. And do feel free to use the hashtag homebodies, hashtag stay-at-home-fest, and we can get to some more of these questions on Twitter in the next couple of days. So absolutely feel free to ask. So with these prompts, we're going to divide them up. So we've got not as much time as we would like, but do you ever, when you start getting the swing of things? And what me and Victoria wanted you to think about was, and what we think about in our writing, is a part of your body, not the whole thing, just a part. For people who might have suddenly go, oh, I'll do it about this, or I'll do it about that. Absolutely. You can use things like your hands. I think hands have come into a lot of attention over the last year and a half, making sure they're clean, they're sanitized. Many of you, your hands will be wrecked with all the sanitizer. You're maybe having to pay more attention to your hands. Hands are a place of safety. They can also be a place of danger. That's something that you can write about. And a second prompt in about 5 minutes will be a different part of your body. But it might be the case that you want to write about your knee or your elbow or your pinky or anything like that. So we're not saying it has to be about one thing, but if you're a bit stuck, maybe just try your hands. Just really give yourself about 5 minutes, and I just want you to really think about. Could be a list of what do your hands do? What do your hands mean? What do they say to people? What do other people's hands say to you? Maybe you have a loved one and their hands are just the best thing ever. So we're going to give you 5 minutes to do that, and then Victoria is going to come in with that second prompt. Okay.
Will you time, Aoife?
I will.
Good woman.
Just about a minute left. Okay, so if you come to that last thought or that last sentence or wherever that next full stop is going to fall, if you use full stops. Okay, and then our second prompt, Victoria, if you want to.
So I suppose hands are like the acceptable part of the body. You know, most people are relatively comfortable with them. We use them to talk, as Aoife said. But what about the feet? And particularly as summer is coming up, and we might be exposing our feet for the first time in a long time without the help of pedicurists and so on. How do we feel about them? So how do we feel about how our feet look? You know, what purpose our feet have? Do we have pain in our feet? Do we remember anyone holding our feet or touching our feet? Or even how our feet smell? And it doesn't have to be that in a particularly you know, offensive way, but you know, how familiar are we with them? Do we know what they look like? Do we acknowledge them? Because they are often hidden away for, especially in Ireland and the UK, for so much of the year. What do they represent for us? How do we associate with them? So we're going to give you another 5 minutes for that, starting now. So just keep writing, don't think too much, and see what comes up for you. Okay, just under 1 minute left. So start finishing up that final thought. Okay, that's it. Time's up. And time's up for us too, Aoife.
It is. It's
It
absolutely
went very fast.
I can only hope that everybody else has found this as enlightening as I have. It's amazing. There was one quick question there that says, who do you go back to when you're doing your own writing? And I say it's other people who are writing. I find that the most exciting, to know that it's happening in real time.
Yes,
we're sitting here
exactly.
together and apart. We're coming up with ideas, we're writing things down, and who knows where it goes. But thank you so much to everybody who came in today, because with some of you the weather could be glorious, with some of you it could be lashing rain, we don't know. But it was lovely getting the chance to come together and think and talk about this.
And thank you too to Carly and to Joanna and to Fran and to Carolyn, of course, and everyone at the Stay at Home Festival for making this possible and for having us here to talk with you today. And thanks so much for the great questions. We didn't get to all of them, but we'll hopefully see you soon at another event. Enjoy the rest of Stay at Home Fest.